I wouldn't call myself a very active person, but I do enjoy working out and running every now and then to stay in somewhat good shape. My friend Jay and I usually work out and run together, as Jay is always in shape and trains me, if you will. Jay and I would often run late at night in my neighborhood, since most of it is well lit, and I live in a decent area. However, we stopped running in my neighborhood 2 months ago after this happened. The way my neighborhood is laid out is that there's a main road that connects to separate roads branching off, but ultimately, they all connect back to the main road, which leads to a dirt path extending into local farms and larger properties. This is important to understand the situation Jay and I were in. One night, we decided to run from my house onto a path that goes through the woods to one of the roads that branches off from the main road in my neighborhood. We planned to use that road to reconnect to the main road, then continue running to the dirt path before heading back to my house using the main road. I know it sounds confusing, but we took this unusual route to maximize the miles we could run as our usual path. Just running on the main road and back was getting too easy for us. The run started as usual, with Jay and me running from my house to the path, talking about high school drama as we ran. However, we soon began to hear footsteps behind us. At first, we didn't think much of it since the path we were running on was frequently used, and we often saw other runners or people using it to cross from one area to another in the neighborhood. But as we continued, the footsteps remained behind us, mirroring our speed. When we picked up the pace and ran quickly, the footsteps followed suit. When we slowed down to a jog or walk for a moment, so did they. At this point, Jay and I were obviously a bit nervous and freaked out, but we were almost to the well-lit. When we finally exited the path onto the road, we looked back and saw no one behind us. We both exchanged the same what the fuck look and decided it was probably just another runner trying to keep their distance from us. We continued onto the side road that led to the main road of my neighborhood and followed the main road all the way to where it turned into the dirt path. At this point, we were both still feeling good and decided to push on, running further down the dirt path. However, unlike the main road, this path had no streetlights and was lined with trees, creating an ominous atmosphere at night. Jay and I ran about a mile down this road before deciding to turn back. As we turned, I caught a glimpse of a dark figure quickly darting into the trees on the left side of the road. This immediately reminded me of the footsteps from earlier, and I began to feel noticeably uneasy. I told Jay that I had seen a figure jump into the trees along the path that we needed to take back. He dismissed it, saying I was just being paranoid and seeing things because of how far we'd run. I almost believed him and started doubting myself, so we began making our way back to my house. We ran past the spot where I had seen the figure with no issues, but just as we were about to reach the main road again, we heard rustling about 20 feet behind us in the trees. We turned around and saw a figure standing in the middle of the dirt road. The figure was facing away from us and was dressed in a black hoodie, along with very ripped and dirty key pants and black shoes. At this moment, I was more scared than I had ever been in my life. It felt like my heart was going to fly out of my chest. It was beating that hard. Jay looked at me, then back at the figure and said, "What the hell are you doing?" but stopped mid-sentence when we both heard the person start laughing. It was an awful, cackling, cringe-inducing laugh. Then as we stood frozen, the person turned to look at us, still laughing before suddenly stopping. Now, he just stared at us with a glare that still haunt me to this day. His wide eyes and pale face burned into my memory. Jay and I exchanged one last look before running faster than we had ever run in our lives, sprinting the entire 2 miles back to my house. As we ran, we heard that terrible laugh again behind us, which only made us run faster. When we finally got back to my house, I threw up, then rushed inside through the back door, locking every entrance and shutting my garage doors. We sat there panting still processing what had just happened, and swore never to run in my neighborhood at night again. If you're a night runner, always stay in well-lit areas and bring a friend just to be safe. As a high school junior, I ran cross-country on track, and I loved running alone. I wasn't the fastest on my team, but I had endurance and could lose myself in the rhythm of my feet hitting the ground. A woman in a quiet rural neighborhood near a forest preserve had hired me to run her hyperactive puppy, Izzy. She'd pay me $10 per run. It seemed like an easy gig. Izzy needed the exercise, and I got a little extra money while training. The area had scattered houses, abandoned farms, a cemetery, and the remnants of a disbanded cult commune. My parents had always warned me running alone in secluded areas, but I figured I was fast enough to outrun anything dangerous. That changed one evening. It was just before dusk when I took Izzy out for a longer run. The setting sun cast a deep orange glow over the treetops, but shadow stretched across the road, making everything feel darker than it should have been. The only sounds were my breathing, Izzy's panting, and the rhythmic thud of my running shoes against the pavement. Occasionally, a bird would flutter in the trees or a distant dog would bark, but otherwise, it was eerily quiet. The farther I ran, the quieter it got, as if the world was slowly emptying itself of sound. About 2 miles in, we reached a stretch of road flanked by thick forest on both sides. That's when Izzy suddenly stopped. Her ears perked, and she stared into the woods completely still. A low whimper escaped her throat. I followed her gaze. At first, I saw from nothing but the dense trees, branches swaying slightly in the breeze. But then between two trunks, a man's face peeked out from behind a tree. He was short, maybe in his 30s, wearing a hat pulled low over his face, a thick jacket, despite the mild weather and gloves. His eyes were locked on me, unblinking. His stillness unnerved me, but I told myself he was probably just a hiker or a hunter. Still, something about the way he stood, like half-hidden, watching silently. It sent a chill down my spine. His presence felt off, like he wasn't just some guy passing through, but something wrong, something that shouldn't have been there at all. I gave him a polite nod, trying to appear unfazed, and I started to jog again. My heart was beating a little faster now, and not from the run. A few steps later, Izzy stopped again, her body rigid, tail between her legs. My stomach dropped as I turned back. The man had moved closer. He wasn't behind the tree anymore. He was standing right at the tree line, just feet from the road, still staring. His head was tilted slightly now, as if studying me. A sickening realization crept in. He wanted me to know he had moved. He wanted me to notice. I felt something cold slip down my spine. My body was instinctively preparing to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. Maybe he was just some weirdo trying to mess with me. Maybe if I ignored him, he'd get bored. I kept running, trying to stay composed, glancing over my shoulder every few steps. At first, I thought he was gone. The woods looked empty again. But then, just as I turned forward, I caught movement in my peripheral vision. I turned back, and he was sprinting toward me. He had a butcher cleaver. A choked scream got caught in my throat as pure, unfiltered terror exploded through my body. I didn't think. I just ran. Adrenaline shot through me like electricity, and I pushed myself harder than I ever had in a race. My breath came in ragged gasps, Izzy struggling to keep up, her leash jerking in my grip as we tore down the road. I had never known fear like this before, a fear that exists deep in the bones, a kind that tells you you're going to die if you slow down. I glanced back only once. He was still chasing me. His face was twisted in pure rage, his mouth slightly open as if growling, the gleam of the blade catching the last rays of sunlight. He wasn't just running. He was running erratically, his arms flailing in unnatural motions, his legs moving almost too fast, like something that wasn't used to running at all. That's when I realized he wasn't breathing. I could hear my own frantic gasps. I could hear Izzy panting. I could even hear the distant rustling of the trees, but not him. His footsteps thundered behind me, his pace matching mine. But there was no sound of breath, just that awful silence beneath the pounding of his boots. I reached a neighborhood and sprinted between the houses, zigzagging through yards, hoping to lose him. My vision was blurring. My legs were screaming, but I couldn't stop. I darted behind a shed with Izzy. Finally, when I was sure we had put enough distance between us, I pressed myself against the rough wooden wall, gripping my knees, gasping for breath. Silence. I swallowed hard, my heart beat still hammering in my ears.